My daughter's fiancé looked me in the eye at the dinner table and told me the greatest gift I could give for the wedding was to sit at the back table, next to the kitchen, so I wouldn't ruin the photos. My stepdaughter nodded in agreement. My wife looked down at her wine glass and said nothing, so I did exactly what they asked. I removed myself from the picture, but before I left, I took back everything that had my name on it. 3 days later, the only thing left in that empty mansion was a single folding chair and a receipt with the number 0 on it. It was the shock of their lives. Before I tell you how I dismantled their entire world in 72 hours, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. And if you believe that gratitude cannot be bought and that betrayal always comes with a price, hit that like button. My name is Alan Whitmore. I am 64 years old. For the last 12 years, I have been the silent engine keeping a luxury lifestyle afloat for people who secretly despised me. I spent my whole life as an appraiser. I was the head of valuation at an investment bank, the kind of man who could look at a number and know instantly whether it was real or a bubble. I know how to spot a bad investment. I just never realized the worst investment of my life was sleeping in the master bedroom while I slept in the study downstairs. That Friday night was supposed to be a celebration. We were at a French restaurant on the top floor of a tower overlooking the river. The lighting was dim, the tablecloths were crisp white, and the air smelled of old money and quiet judgment. I sat across from my wife Diane and her daughter Chloe, who was 25. Chloe was glowing, the kind of glow that comes from studio lighting and weekly facials. She was scrolling her phone, probably checking the engagement on her latest post about wedding stress. The waiter set down the bill. Without looking up, Chloe slid a cream-colored envelope across the table toward me. It was the wedding invitation. Thick paper, embossed, gold lettering. I knew the texture well because I was the one who paid for the printing. I opened it, expecting to see my name at the top as the host. Traditionally, the father of the bride, or in this case, the stepfather who paid for everything, is listed first. I read the elegant script. The family of Mr. Gary Preston request the honor of your presence. I froze. Gary Preston. Her biological father. The man who hadn't paid a dime since she was 4 years old. The man who showed up once a year with a hangover and a cheap toy, then vanished when the rent came due. My name was nowhere. Chloe, I said, keeping my voice very low. I think there's a misprint. My name is missing. She finally looked up, dissecting a scallop with her knife. It's not a mistake, Alan. We talked about it. Gary is walking me down the aisle. I felt a cold pressure in my chest. But I'm the one hosting this wedding. I've already put down deposits on everything. The venue, the flowers, the catering. Gary hasn't contributed a cent. Chloe sighed, the kind of dramatic sigh she used when a waiter brought tap water instead of bottled. Please don't make this about money. You always make it about money. This is about aesthetics. Gary has that rugged, artistic look. It fits the vintage vibe we're going for. You're a bit corporate. You look stiff in photos. I want the pictures to be perfect. I looked at my wife, the woman I'd been married to for 12 years. The woman I'd taken across Europe. The woman whose old debts I cleared when we married. I waited for her to speak. Surely she would say, Chloe, that's disrespectful to the man who paid for your teeth and your degree. Diane took a sip of her wine. She dabbed her lips with her napkin and avoided my eyes. Honey, she said softly, to me, not to Chloe. It's her special day. We just want her to be happy. Gary is family. You know how sensitive he is about his status. We don't want him to feel excluded. Excluded. The word hung in the air. The man who abandoned them was family. The man who paid the mortgage was an accessory that didn't match the color scheme. I looked down at the leather folder holding the bill. A small fortune for a dinner where I'd just been told I wasn't photogenic enough to be a father. I didn't yell. I didn't flip the table. 40 years in boardrooms had taught me that when you let emotions speak, you lose leverage. I pulled out my black card and set it gently on the cloth. I understand, I said. I want the photos to be perfect too. Chloe clapped her hands. Thank you. I knew you'd get it. Oh, and since you're being so understanding, Tyler and I were thinking about upgrading the champagne toast to the imported label. It's only a little extra. I looked at her smile. I saw the braces I paid for. I saw the entitlement I'd been watering for 12 years. Order whatever you want, I said. The ride home was silent. I drove. I always drove. Diane sat in the passenger seat, scrolling her tablet. Chloe sat in the back, texting her fiancé, Tyler. I was doing the math, not the wedding budget, but the math of my life. The years I'd postponed retirement to fund this. The investment portfolio I'd liquidated to buy the house because Diane said she needed to be closer to her friends. Diane cleared her throat, her voice sweet, the way it got when she saw something. Honey, she said, if Gary's walking Chloe down the aisle, he needs to look the part. He doesn't have a proper suit. That charcoal one of yours, the one you wore to the gala last year, you and Gary are about the same size now. Could he borrow it? Just for the weekend. We don't want him looking shabby next to Chloe. I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. They didn't just want to replace me. They wanted to strip me for parts. Dress the man who abandoned his own child in my clothes, so he could play the successful father. I took a slow breath. If I exploded now, they'd paint me as the villain, jealous, petty, controlling. I needed to be smarter. I needed to become the ghost they already thought I was. Sure, I said, my voice flat. He can borrow the suit. Really? Diane sounded surprised. You're being so big about this. I turned on the radio and let the violins fill the space. The wedding was 3 weeks away. The final payments for the venue and the caterer were due in 5 days. That was my window. 5 days to dismantle 12 years of lies. Back at the house with its white columns and manicured lawn, I told them I had some work to finish in my study. I walked down the hall past everything I had paid for, the imported rug in the foyer, the abstract painting Chloe insisted was an investment, the grand piano nobody played. I went into my study and closed the door. It was the only room in the house that felt like mine. I could hear Diane in the kitchen. She was on the phone, probably thinking I was out of earshot. Yeah, he said yes to the suit. She laughed, a high, tinkling laugh like breaking glass. I thought he'd put up a fight. He's so desperate to be liked, he just rolled over. A pause. Then she went on, he's still useful. We just keep him sweet until the honeymoon's paid for. Chloe wants the Maldives, that's another chunk. After the wedding, we deal with the house. I think I can talk him into downsizing to a condo, cash out the equity. You get that truck you wanted. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a wedding. This was long-term parasitism. They planned to bleed me dry and then discard the husk. I heard a man's voice, thin and tinny through the speaker. Gary, does the old man suspect anything? What about that asset agreement? No, Diane scoffed. He thinks he's so clever with his finance degree. But when it comes to family, he's soft. He sees himself as the savior. It's pathetic, really. He's just an old ATM that needs a little oil now and then. An old ATM. That was the sentence that severed the last thread of affection I had for these people. The anger simmering in my gut boiled into something else. Something colder, something lethal. I stood, went to the painting behind my desk, and swung it aside to reveal the wall safe. I spun the dial. The steel door clicked open. Inside were documents, passports, backup drives. I pulled out the blue folder from the bottom labeled Premarital Assets and Estate Planning. On top was the deed to the house. I ran my finger over the legal description, sole owner Alan Whitmore. Because Diane had credit problems from her first marriage, her name was never on the deed. We'd signed a prenuptial agreement. Any asset bought with funds from my pre-retirement accounts remained solely mine. I looked at the wedding vendor contracts, every single one signed by me. Not Chloe, not Tyler, me. I wasn't just the ATM. I was the bank, and the bank was about to close. I checked the time. 11:30 on a Friday. Most people would wait until Monday to call a lawyer. I am not most people. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. 2 rings. Whitmore, a raspy voice. Arthur never slept. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to scorch the earth. Arthur, I'm sorry for the late hour. I need to sell a property. Fast, cash buyer, closed in 7 days. Silence, then a dry chuckle. The estate. Diane's not going to like that. Diane's not going to know, I said. Not until the locks are changed. And Arthur, I need to cancel some contracts. A lot of contracts. The click of a lighter, a deep inhale. Start talking. I've got a pen. For the next hour, I laid out the architecture of their downfall. I didn't raise my voice. I moved assets from column A to column B. I authorized triggering the penalty clauses in the wedding contracts. I approved the immediate sale of the house to a fund that specialized in distressed assets. They'd buy it 20% under market if they could take possession in 48 hours. I told them to take the deal. I didn't care about the loss. Losing money was acceptable. Losing my dignity was not. When I hung up, the house was quiet. Diane and Chloe were asleep, dreaming of tailored suits and beaches. They had no idea the roof over their heads had already been sold. No idea the cards in their wallets were already dead plastic. I stood at the window and looked at the pool glowing blue in the moonlight. I remembered teaching Chloe to swim in that pool. I remembered holding her when she cried after her first heartbreak. I had been a good man, a generous man, but tonight Alan the father died. Alan the appraiser was back. And this audit was going to be brutal. That weekend became a masterclass in psychological warfare. I'd spent my life learning to spot a market inflated by greed right before the inevitable crash. Now I wasn't just spotting the bubble, I was the one pumping air into it. Saturday morning, the florist. Chloe sat with the designer, holding a sample bouquet of white roses. Tasteful. Affordable. It's nice, she said without conviction. The total's already high, Alan. Can we go bigger? I leaned back. Chloe, don't look at the price. Look at the legacy. These photos last forever. Do you want to look back and see budget roses or a cascading waterfall of orchids that screams royalty? Her eyes lit up. Show me the orchids. The new estimate came back triple. Tyler, the fiancé, looked up from his phone. Whoa, that's the price of a car. I leaned toward the young man who'd never held a job longer than 6 months. Tyler, it's an investment in your image. Don't worry about the cash flow. I've already got a transfer coming from my brokerage account. Takes a few business days to clear. Just put the deposit on your card, and I'll write you a check Monday when the market's open. Plus, think of the points. Greed is a powerful anesthetic. It numbs the survival instinct. Tyler swiped his card. The contract was in his name. The liability was his. The promise of reimbursement was just air. From the florist to the caterer, Gary showed up, tight shirt, the red face of a man who drinks his breakfast. He sat at the head of the table as if he were paying. The chicken's dry, Gary announced, tossing his fork. If I'm walking my girl down the aisle, we can't serve dry chicken. Reflects poorly on the family. I suppressed a laugh. The only thing reflecting poorly on this family was the man at the head of the table. But I nodded. Gary's right. Bring out the surf and turf. Lobster in the prime cut. Diane's eyes widened. Alan, that's 100 more per head. We have 200 guests. I squeezed her hand. I want you to be proud. I want your friends talking about this wedding for years. Gary tore into a lobster tail with his bare hands, butter dripping down his chin. Now this is class. Good call, Al. And again, when the upgrade deposit came due, I told them to put it on their cards. It builds your credit history. Looks great for mortgage applications. I'll clear it all Monday. They signed, they ate. They were feasting on their own bankruptcy. By Sunday afternoon, the bubble was enormous. We upgraded the bar to the platinum package. Hired a 12-piece band instead of a DJ. Booked a vintage car for the getaway. Every contract signed by Chloe or Tyler. Every deposit paid with their cards, or with the savings Tyler's parents had given him for a house down payment. That Sunday, I met the buyer at a coffee shop 3 towns over. A representative for a fund that bought distressed homes for cash. On the table lay the deed, the appraisal, and the contract he slid across, a lowball offer 25% under value. In my old life, I'd have fired anyone who brought me a deal this bad. But today, I wasn't looking for profit. I was looking for speed. I was buying a weapon, and weapons are expensive. The price is acceptable, I said. He blinked, surprised. You know the market's hot. You'd get more if you listed it. I don't have time for open houses. I need the funds wired tomorrow morning, and the title transferred immediately. One condition, I lease it back for exactly 7 days. On the 8th day, 9 a.m., you take possession. You change the locks. Then I gave him the cornerstone of the whole plan. Not the deed, a post-nuptial agreement signed 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Diane had a secret, a gambling habit. It started small, then moved to the high-stakes rooms. I found out when a man with a broken nose showed up at my office demanding money she'd borrowed. She was on the floor of our living room, weeping, begging me to save her. I saved her. I paid the debt. But I'm a businessman. I don't give away money without securing collateral. In exchange for the bailout, she signed a post-nuptial agreement waiving all rights to my premarital assets, specifically the house and my retirement accounts. She signed without reading it. She probably thought I'd never use it. She was wrong. The buyer flipped through the pages and whistled. Ironclad, you really tied her hands. I didn't tie her hands, I said, taking the document back. I just refused to be the one who drowned with her. I signed my name 3 times. With each signature, I felt the weight of the house lift off my shoulders. That afternoon, I came home. Diane was at the door, holding fabric swatches up against the brick. Alan, I was thinking, after the wedding, we should repaint the exterior. A soft cream, so elegant. I looked at the house that now belonged to a fund, at the woman planning renovations on a property she'd been evicted from hours earlier. Cream sounds nice, I said. She hooked her arm through mine. And Chloe said we should turn your study into a nursery eventually. You don't really use it. You could move your desk to the basement. The basement. They wanted to put me in the basement of a house I'd just sold. The irony was so rich I could taste it. After you, I said, opening the door. Monday afternoon, Gary walked into my house without knocking. Ever since he'd been crowned father of the bride, he entered as if he held the deed. Hey, Al, he called out. You in the dungeon? On my desk lay the charcoal suit, freshly cleaned, wrapped in plastic like a body bag for a ghost. Gary tore off the plastic, slipped on the jacket, sucked in his gut, and turned to the mirror. He adjusted the lapels and admired himself like the CEO of the world. Not bad, he muttered. You've got taste, I'll give you that. Then he leaned against my desk, arms crossed. You know, Al, I gotta hand it to you. You're taking this better than I thought. I'm a pragmatist, Gary. Chloe wants her father. Who am I to stand in the way of blood? Gary laughed. Blood, that's the thing, isn't it? You buy the houses, the cars, the degrees, but at the end of the day, blood calls to blood. You're just the resource. I'm the source. He picked up a crystal paperweight and tossed it in the air. Diane and I were talking. She worries about you. This big house, all these stairs. After the wedding, maybe it's time to sell. Get you a nice little condo. And the rest of the equity really helps the kids get started. Diane deserves some fun too, don't you think? He was evicting me. In my own study, wearing my own suit, I stood. For a second, fear flickered in his eyes. He remembered that before I wore suits, I'd been a soldier. But I didn't raise a fist. I smoothed the lapel of his jacket. "You're right, Gary. It's time for a change." I reached into my pocket. "Here, you'll need a pocket square to finish the look." I pulled out a folded white silk handkerchief. Hidden in the folds was a device no larger than a stick of gum. A digital recorder, 48 hours of battery. It was already recording. I tucked it into the breast pocket of the suit and patted it gently. "Perfect. Go meet Tyler. Have a drink. Celebrate." I waited until I heard his engine fade down the driveway. He was wearing the wire, walking into a bar to meet the other leech. Alcohol loosens tongues. Arrogance loosens them faster. In that pocket, right against his heart, was the evidence I needed to bury them all. I opened my laptop, one last transaction. I logged into the trust I'd set up for Chloe 10 years ago. A large sum in a high-yield account. I went to the Beneficiaries tab, highlighted her name, and hit delete. Then I typed in a new name, a foundation for wounded veterans and orphaned children. Confirm. The screen flashed green. Successful. Tuesday, I gave the two of them 2 nights at a coastal spa. "You've been working so hard. You need to glow for the photos. The car comes in an hour," Chloe squealed. Diane hugged me, tears in her eyes. "You're the best husband. I don't know what I'd do without you." "You'll find out soon enough," I thought. At 9, a black car pulled up. Chloe blew me a kiss from the back seat. "Bye, Dad, you're the best." It was the first time in years she'd called me Dad, without following it with a request for money. It was also the last time. The moment the car turned the corner, the smile dropped from my face like a heavy curtain. I called the movers. 3 minutes later, 2 large trucks rolled up the driveway, white-glove relocation specialists, the kind used by museums and billionaires. "Mr. Whitmore, we have the list," the foreman said. "Correct. Very specific. If I bought it, it goes. If she bought it or it's cheap, it stays. I want the contrast visible. A surgical extraction. The grand piano Diane couldn't play, only used to display photos of herself, gone. The rugs rolled up, bare floor beneath. My reading chair carried out. The 80-inch television unmounted, leaving a rectangle of dust on the wall. The wine cellar, 300 bottles. Pack it all. Leave 2 bottles of supermarket wine on the bottom rack. Why's that? A mover asked. So they have something to drink when they realize their lives are over. By evening, the house didn't look like a home. It looked like a warehouse going out of business. The dining table, gone, replaced by the wobbly folding table Diane had brought into the marriage 12 years ago, pathetic in the center of the grand room. The leather sofas, gone. Upstairs, I stripped the master bedroom. I took the mattress and left the box spring. A little petty, but then I remembered they'd wanted to put me in the basement. Petty is a matter of perspective. Her closet, I didn't touch a thread. Let her keep the costumes. She'd need them to keep up the illusion of wealth. By 6, the trucks were full. I stood in the foyer, my footsteps echoing. The house was cold, stripped of the insulation of wealth. Just a structure now. I went into the kitchen one last time, the only room with power. I set the envelope on the island, the possession notice from the new owners, the cancellation receipts, and a handwritten letter. I pulled up a single folding chair, facing the envelope. It looked like an altar, a monument to consequences. I took down the family photos and stacked them face down on the floor. I didn't want them. I locked the back door. At the front, I dropped the heavy key into the lockbox. It landed with a sound like a gavel striking a bench. Case closed. I got in my car. The sun was setting. I had a one-way ticket to the mountains, to a small farm I'd bought under a name no one could trace. They had 2 days of spa treatments and cucumber water. Then they'd come home to the nothing they had created. I can picture the scene exactly, not because I was there, but because I spent 12 years studying these 2 women. Wednesday afternoon, the car brought them home, glowing from the spa. They were laughing. The first sign something was wrong was the silence. The house usually hummed, the pool filter, the air conditioning. Today it was dark. The curtains gone, the windows like hollow black eyes. Diane climbed the steps and punched in the door code. Red light. Again denied. When you unlock a furnished house, the sound is muffled. When you bang on an empty house, it echoes like a drum. Chloe cupped her hands against the window. "Mom, it's empty." Diane ran over, gasping. "We've been robbed. Where says Alan? Call the police." But a robber takes the TV and the jewelry. A robber doesn't take the curtains. A robber doesn't haul away a heavy dining table. Chloe remembered the spare key in the fake rock by the garden hose, the one I'd left there on purpose because I wanted them to get inside. I wanted them to hear the echo. They burst into the kitchen. "Hello, anyone here?" A heavy, dusty silence answered. Then they saw it. In the center of the empty kitchen, a single folding chair facing the counter. On the counter, a thick envelope. It looked like a shrine to the end of their world. Diane opened it, hands shaking. The first page, the closing statement on the sale. Sale date yesterday, seller Alan Whitmore. "Sold," she whispered. "He sold the house." Chloe grabbed the second stack, cancellation receipts. The florist canceled, the caterer canceled, the venue deposit forfeited. Every orchid, every lobster tail canceled. Then the handwritten note. Diane read it aloud, her voice cracking on every word. Dear Diane and Chloe, you made it very clear that Gary is the father and I am just the bank. I've decided to respect your wishes. I have removed both myself and my bank from the equation. The house is sold. The new owners take possession at 5 o'clock today. You are currently trespassing. The wedding contracts were in my name, and since I am not the father, I have canceled them. Gary, as the real father, is free to rebook them. Do not look for me. Do not look for the money. Both are gone. Signed, Alan. The scream that tore out of Chloe's throat was not grief. It was the rage of a parasite ripped from its host. She swept the papers off the counter and kicked the chair across the floor. Diane slid down against the cabinets. Where are we going to sleep? Alan, where are we going to sleep? Then the front door opened, heavy footsteps. Gary, looking for a cold beer and a place to crash. Hey, why's the TV gone? Are you redecorating? Chloe began to laugh, high and hysterical, bordering on madness. Welcome home, Dad, she screamed at the empty ceiling. Welcome home. The silence broke with a vibration. Chloe's phone, then Diane's, then Tyler's, who just walked in the back door and frozen. A symphony of notifications. I'd timed the cancellation emails to go out at exactly 5. Chloe read the catering email, her voice thin as a lost child's. The full balance due because the food was already ordered. If not wired by noon tomorrow, collections and a lawsuit. Gary scoffed. It's a mistake. Just call Al. Tell him to quit playing games. He's not playing games, Dad. Chloe spun on him. He sold the house. He's gone. Don't you understand? The florist, the orchids ordered from overseas, non-refundable, charged to the card on file. All eyes turned to Tyler, his card, the one his parents co-signed, the one he'd flashed around when he thought I'd reimburse him. Tyler opened his banking app, his face going white. The venue, the florist, the band, everyone rushing to grab their piece before the money ran out. No, that's my parents' money. That's the down payment for our house. He looked at Chloe, and for the first time there was no adoration in his eyes. Only the cold calculation of a man realizing he'd made a terrible investment. You told me he'd pay, Tyler said, his voice low and dangerous. You stood in that florist shop and told me to swipe the card because Alan always pays. You said he was a pushover. Baby, we can fix this, Chloe pleaded. There is no we, Chloe. I signed up to marry a girl with a house and a trust fund and security. I did not sign up to marry the daughter of him. He pointed at Gary. Gary bristled. Hey, watch your mouth. That's my daughter. Then you pay for it, Tyler snapped. You're the father of the bride, right? Pull out your wallet and write the check for the lobster and the dead flowers. Go ahead, I'm waiting. The room fell silent. Gary didn't have that kind of money. Gary had a truck that needed a new transmission and a tab at the local bar. Tyler laughed, bitter and harsh. That's what I thought. You're all frauds. Living off that old man's money, acting like royalty, and you're nothing. He turned, walked out, and drove off exactly as I had hours before. But I left with dignity. He left them with a cancellation fee. Chloe slid down the doorframe, face in her hands. One more email, the wedding planner, releasing their date to another couple, deposit non-refundable. Alan, she sobbed into the empty house. Dad, please pick up. But the phone she was calling was at the bottom of a trash can at the airport. And the man she was calling was ordering a glass of wine on a flight, enjoying the silence for the first time in years. In her desperation, Chloe went live. She sat on the floor of the empty kitchen, wearing a hoodie of mine she'd never touched, and told the end of story that her jealous stepfather had abandoned them, sold on the house, canceled the wedding, all because he couldn't stand her reconnecting with her real father. She surgically removed her own cruelty and stitched the story back together to make me the monster. The mob woke up. But in her rush to destroy me, she made a fatal error. She went public. A private conversation is hearsay. A live stream with tens of thousands of witnesses is evidence. She had just handed my lawyer the grounds for a defamation suit. And Gary, drunk, tracked down the place I was renting and pounded on the door at midnight, threatening me. I let the cameras record. I didn't fight back, even though decades ago I'd learned to put a man down in 3 seconds. If I fought back, it was a brawl between two men. If I stood still while a drunk assaulted an unarmed senior in his own home, it was a felony. I chose to take a few bruises in exchange for my enemy's freedom. The police arrived in 5 minutes. Gary was arrested for breaking and entering an assault. I pressed charges, and I had all of it on video. 6 months later, the courtroom. Diane sat hunched over. Her lawyer, a vulture in a cheap suit, stood and spoke of the devoted wife, abandoned and destitute, demanding half the estate and spousal support. My lawyer, Arthur, rose slowly, still as a cobra waiting to strike. Your Honor, we're not here to debate feelings. We're here to debate facts. He produced the post-nuptial agreement, signed 5 years ago, notarized, reviewed by independent counsel. Then he explained why it existed, the gambling debts, the casino statements, the wire transfer I'd sent to save her from harm. That's not duress, Your Honor. That's a bailout. Diane's face went red. She'd never told her own lawyer about that. Then Arthur plugged in the recording. Gary's voice filled the courtroom, arrogant, mocking. The old man bought it, hook, line, and sinker. Diane's got him wrapped around her finger. Once the honeymoon's paid for, she files for divorce. We just need him to liquidate the house first, so it becomes cash. Then we take half, the perfect retirement plan. Dead silence. The judge had heard enough. No recess needed. The claim of duress denied. The agreement, valid and enforceable. Based on the evidence of a conspiracy to defraud, the request for spousal support dismissed with prejudice. The gavel came down like a gunshot. Diane wailed. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked past her table. She looked up. Alan, I have nowhere to go. I stopped. You have Gary. He's in jail. You put him there. Then wait for him, I said. You two deserve each other. On the courthouse steps, Chloe chased after me, face swollen. Dad, don't go. I was wrong. Tyler was a gold digger. You were right. I left him. I have nothing. I'm drowning in debt. You wouldn't let your little girl starve. I pulled a blue folder from my briefcase. Her eyes lit with hope. She thought it was a checkbook. This is the education and wedding trust in your name, I said. I set it up 10 years ago. $500,000. She gasped, the sound of salvation. She was already spending it in her head. But this isn't a gift, I said. It's a contract, and it has conditions. Clause A, the beneficiary must show proof of graduation from an accredited university. You told us you graduated 2 years ago. You posted photos in a cap and gown. I gave you a bracelet. This is a letter from the registrar. You dropped out sophomore year to become an influencer. You used the tuition money on cosmetic work and followers. You forged the diploma. Her face went pale. I was willing to overlook that if you'd passed the second condition. Clause B, the funds release on your wedding day, provided the stepfather who raised you is acknowledged, respected, and honored as the father of the bride. Any act of public humiliation, disavowal, or malicious intent toward me results in immediate revocation. I closed the folder. You had one job, Chloe. You didn't have to be a scholar. You just had to be a decent human being. You had to treat the man who raised you with a fraction of the respect you gave to a stranger who abandoned you. But you couldn't do it. You had to tell the whole world I was just Alan. I took out a pen, crossed out her name on the beneficiary page, and wrote in the foundation for veterans and orphans. I signed. No, she lunged. That's my money. It was never your money. It was mine. Now it goes to people who actually understand sacrifice. I photographed the signed page and sent it to my lawyer. It's done. The transfer's initiated. The account is empty. Chloe collapsed, a sound like a wounded animal. The life raft, the future, the easy way out, vaporized by her own arrogance. You wanted to be independent. You wanted to cut ties with the ATM. Congratulations. You're free now. Go make yourself. I walked to the waiting taxi. Dad, please don't leave me here, she cried behind me. I opened the door and looked back once. Goodbye, Chloe. I got in and shut the door. Airport, please. As the taxi merged into traffic, I took the SIM card from my phone, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces in the ashtray. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes. For the first time in 12 years, the silence wasn't empty. It was full of peace, full of the future. And somewhere behind me, $500,000 was clearing, buying warm beds and hot meals for people who'd been forgotten. It was the best investment I ever made. 6 months is a long time in finance, but in the mountains it passes like a single afternoon. I sat on the stone terrace of the farm I'd bought with a fraction of what I'd saved. The air smelled of pine and damp earth and the sweet scent of ripening fruit. No one screaming for a credit card. No one asking me to shrink myself so they could feel bigger. Arthur updated me every week. Gary was serving his sentence, 3 years, having taken a plea deal to avoid a longer one. He finally had the free housing and meals he'd always felt entitled to. Diane was working the lunch shift at a diner, her hair graying at the roots, the expensive dye jobs a thing of the past. And Chloe got the fame she wanted, but not the way she wanted it. Her meltdown livestream became a joke, the face of entitlement. She deleted her social media 2 months ago. The silence she left behind was the most honest thing she ever produced. One evening my phone buzzed, unknown number. A message from Diane asking to borrow a little money, invoking 12 years of marriage as if it were currency that still held value. She didn't understand she'd spent that currency long ago, on gambling debts, on lies. On the day she sat in silence while her daughter erased me from a wedding invitation. I felt nothing, no anger, no pity, no urge to rescue. The part of me that used to be her husband, that used to be a savior, had died in that empty kitchen. I looked at the fire in the stone hearth, eating through dry logs. I didn't reply. That would be acknowledging her existence. I stood and tossed the phone, a gentle underhand throw. It spun through the air, catching the last light of day, and landed in the heart of the fire. The plastic began to bubble. The screen went black, then cracked, smoke curled up. Every future plea, every guilt trip, silenced forever by the cleansing heat. I picked up my glass and walked to the edge of the terrace, looking down over the valley. The sun was setting, painting the sky violet and gold. The bells of a distant church began to ring. I raised my glass to the west, toward a cell where a man in prison clothes was sleeping. "Thank you, Gary," I said into the quiet night. "You wanted to be the man. You wanted the suit, the credit. Well, you got it. You paid the bill for my freedom. Thank you for paying for the party of this life instead of me." I drank. It was the best glass I'd ever had. The sun vanished completely, leaving me in the dark. But I wasn't afraid of the dark anymore. For the first time in my life, alone didn't mean lonely. It meant free. Let them beg. Let them cry. I have grapes to harvest. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me know in the comments, do you think I went too far, or did they get exactly what they deserved? And you, what would you have done with the phone? Until next time, remember the sweetest revenge isn't just living well, it's living free.